This 8-year-old girl, Emily, went to her father, who had been married for a second time, but was rejected by her stepmother. In an accident, she accidentally rescued a seriously injured wolf cub. After she cared for it for a month, she released the cub back into the mountains. 3 years later, Emily's father died, unexpectedly losing her father's protection. Her stepmother treated her even more badly. Just when Emily was desperate, the little wolf she took care of back then suddenly showed up to repay her kindness. 8 years old, Emily had no choice but to go to her second married father because of the death of her grandmother. Emily's biological mother left when she was 4 years old, and Emily had not seen her mother since. Before long, her father married a widow. After her father remarried, Emily was left with her grandmother. They were poor, but those were the happiest days of Emily's life. That kind of life only lasted for less than 2 years. Her grandmother became seriously ill, and her condition gradually worsened. The situation got worse and worse, and finally her grandmother died. After her grandmother left, 8-year-old Emily had no choice but to go to her father. In order to live temporarily, Emily had to work hard and do a lot of things, so that her stepmother would scold her less. Hey there, Viral Videos here. Before we go on, like this video, smash the subscribe button, and click the notification bell. We post the most beautiful, amazing, and scary videos every single day. Let's proceed with the video. One day, Emily got up early to pick wild vegetables. Because his stepmother wanted to eat wild vegetables, she worked all morning and washed the freshly picked wild vegetables by the river. Just then, she suddenly heard a strange sound like the cry of a child. Emily looked up and saw that there were no occupants, so no children, but the sound came intermittently, which made her extremely uneasy. So she quickened her movement hurriedly, put away the wild vegetables, and was about to leave in a hurry. She was far away, but she could still hear the cry of the child, so Emily stopped. She couldn't bear to leave, so she immediately returned to the woods and looked anxiously. In the end, she found a wounded wolf pup behind a large rock. The little wolf was badly injured and was covered in blood and couldn't move. It seemed that it was attacked by other animals before escaping here. It screamed intermittently, and it had no strength to get up. The little wolf was badly wounded, tired and hungry, and after a while it lost the strength to bark. It lay there dying, very pitiful. Emily felt it was pitiful, so she stepped forward and picked up the little wolf. Emily took the little wolf back to the village and found some herbs to give it a simple dressing. The next day, Emily came nervously to the yard where the little wolf was housed. She thought that the little wolf might have gotten better after the night or had run away, so she wanted to come and see. As a result, she found that the little wolf was still laying there. Emily checked the little wolf's injuries. Its wounds had begun to heal, so she was relieved in this way. After a month, the little wolf gradually recovered to health. Emily sent the little wolf back to the woods and reluctantly said goodbye. She let it go and told it to be vigilant in the future. The little wolf took a few steps forward, only to find that Emily was not following, so it immediately turned back and ran back to Emily. Emily leaned down and stroked it gently. She was reluctant to leave it, but it grew so fast that she couldn't keep it by her side to take care of it. This little wolf seemed to feel Emily's helplessness. It rubbed its head against Emily's hand and sniffed the scar on Emily's right hand, and then went into the woods. One day, 5 years later, Emily was doing laundry by the river. A woman from the same village rushed towards Emily in a panic. She told Emily that her dad had an accident and told her to hurry over. Emily ran to the hospital, but she was still late. Her father died after talking to her stepmother. A woman from the neighboring village came over and wanted to find a good wife for Adam. She said that Adam liked Emily and was willing to give $1,000 as a dowry. Her stepmother immediately had bad thoughts when she heard this. She tried to persuade Emily and said that Emily's father's only wish when he was alive was to wish Emily to be happy. She didn't want to marry someone she didn't like. Not to mention, she had only seen Adam once and knew that his situation was far more serious than the matchmaker said. Emily decisively and quietly escaped from her stepmother's house while everyone was sleeping. A little noise from the forest could startle her nervously. Suddenly, she vaguely felt something, so she slowly stopped and turned around. In the dark night, a hungry old wolf crouched behind her and looked at her. Emily was terrified and decided to give it a try. She thought that if she ran as fast as she could, there might be a chance to escape. However, just as she turned around, she suddenly heard another cry. A dark figure came out of the woods and rushed towards the old wolf behind her. Emily fell to the ground and she turned to the old wolf, fighting a living creature. They bit each other and fell in a ditch together. After a while, the shadow climbed up and turned out to be an adult wolf. I walked slowly towards Emily warily. Emily was too frightened to breathe, but it had come up to it and lowered its head to smell the scar on Emily's right hand. Only then did she realize that it was the wolf she had rescued. 5 years later, it had grown from a puppy to an adult wolf. With its company, Emily was finally relieved. She rose slowly and limped forward, bound to be out of there before dawn. The little wolf followed Emily, looked around vigilantly. It was about to dawn, and they were about to reach the road. Emily said goodbye to this little wolf. She said they were going to get out of there, and she would come back to see it later if she had the chance. The little wolf seemed to know what happened to Emily, and it sat on the ground and watched her. Emily instinctively reached out to touch it, but she hesitated as soon as she reached out, because it was a wolf after all. Even if she had rescued it, but they didn't live together. If it went mad, the consequences would be serious. The little wolf suddenly tilted its head and rubbed it against Emily's hand, and it didn't mind Emily touching it. Such an action completely made Emily no longer worried, and Emily touched his head in a complicated mood and left alone. The little wolf howled as if to see her off. In those years, Emily, who lived alone, suffered a lot. She realized her dreams step by step with her own efforts. One day, she accidentally met her sister-in-law's eldest daughter on the street. The woman told Emily that her stepmother was seriously ill. Emily didn't plan to go back to visit her, but within a few days, her brother came. Her brother kept begging her to go back and visit her stepmother. He said her father left a last message to her stepmother before she died and asked her if she wanted to know. Her stepbrother was helpless and could only say that Emily really fell for it. Emily hesitated for a long time and finally agreed to go home with her brother and ask her stepmother. She asked her brother what disease her stepmother had. Her brother had been hesitating, saying that when she met her stepmother, she would know everything. But Emily was held hostage as soon as she entered the house. Her stepmother wasn't sick at all, but she did have conflicts with her other sons for her young son. Her other two sons had grown up, so she wanted to cover her younger son's tuition. She and her young son had discussed tricking Emily back and trapping her in the house. Adam's situation was special. After Emily left, he had not been able to marry a wife, so Emily's stepmother tricked her back and used the excuse of raising a dairy to Adam's family. Adam's family had been looking forward to it for a long time. After hearing this, although they were a little angry, they really wanted to help Adam, so they agreed. The day of the engagement was approaching soon, and Adam had no idea what the truth was. They thought it was Emily who agreed and came back to marry him. They had happily come with gifts and dowry. Adam came too. He presumably knew he was getting married, so he clapped his hands in the crowd, laughed and danced, looking super happy. Emily seized the moment and called Adam to her, asking him to help open the door. She said she couldn't marry him. Adam almost cried when he heard this. She was about to leave, but found Adam standing behind her crying. It grievously, but he didn't stop her. She curiously asked why he didn't stop her. He stood there and muttered that she didn't want to marry him, and even if he stopped her, she wouldn't like him. Even this idiot knew he could force Emily to like him. But before she could escape from the yard, she was blocked by her stepmother and others. Her stepmother was afraid that the engagement would not go ahead, so she decided to take her back. Suddenly there was a wolf howl and a wild wolf rushed out into the yard. The crowd screamed and ran about. The wild wolf was rushing about in the yard like a madman. It saw Emily's stepmother in the crowd and it jumped at her. Emily's stepmother screamed and fainted with fright. The youngest son, who was standing in front of her, had long since gone into hiding. Emily stopped the little wolf from hurting and made it run. The little wolf escaped from her stepmother's home with Emily later. Emily never came back. It is said that Emily's stepmother was so frightened after being attacked that she sat at the door of her house all day, bullying passerby and saying that there were wolves in the woods. After leaving, Emily opened a cleaning company. Someone had seen her on the street and said she was more confident than ever. What did you think of the story? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like the video and subscribe. See you next time.